Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very accomplished professional from Davos, Switzerland, Dr. Petra Arens-Palzer. Petra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ash, for having me today, and hello from Switzerland to India.
Thank you. Petra is the founder of the Davos Digital Forum and Role Model Rebels and European Women of Legal Tech 2020. She's an author, and all of you know I'm always very partial to authors. She's an author of a book titled Digital Transformation and Legal Transformation, and she's been awarded Women of Legal Tech 2018 in the DACH region and the European Woman of Legal Tech in 2020. So, Petra, before we talk about the intersection of banking, law, and digitalization, tell me about your own journey in brief.
Yeah, in brief, it's very, so I'm one out of five. I have a sibling, I have a twin sister and three brothers. And I studied law in Germany and in Switzerland. And then I used to work in the government. Basically, it was super boring. But at that time, I did my PhD and overcome. And then I moved into banking, which I found much more appealing. And I worked in Berlin. And then from there, I moved to New York. And from New York to Switzerland. And from banking, I basically ended up in a big at UBS. You all know UBS. It was like, and ended up basically in the brand department. And I was running big projects like, marketing the UBS art collection, et cetera, et cetera. And during the crisis, the one in 2008, I lost my job and I had to reinvent myself, but I still stayed in banking. And I worked for JP Morgan. And, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I just realized, I am so much interested in the whole digitalization and the whole emerging technology, everything that's changing the world. And this is why I started a legal technology conference. I wrote this book and I started all these digital projects. And yeah, I was like kind of ahead of the time, because when I was already doing this, the rest, at least at my age group, hadn't done that. And so during the pandemic, I also realized I have no role model. And this is why I created Role Model Rebel, the label you see in my bag.
How amazing. How amazing. Thank you. And how is digitalization reshaping the landscape of the banking industry?
I think there is a lot, all this, all what has done in former times, let's say the private banking, dining and wining, that will stay for a certain amount, but that will go. And the whole, if you look at the fintech industry, just naming some companies like Revolut and anything else there, they really will change the world, because what we see in the whole digitalization process is kind of, get rid of the middleman. And this is something we will see in the future. You see it in banking, but you also see it, for example, in art, where people say we can do it ourselves, we can create the communities. And if we look at digitalization today and looking at these DAOs, the decentralized autonomous organization, then that trend will continue.
Fascinating. And what, in your opinion, are the are the digital initiatives banks prioritizing to enhance customer experience?
Sorry, I didn't catch you.
What are some of the digital initiatives that banks are prioritizing to enhance customer experience?
Well, I think first of all, they work together with startups to get to know how this new generation is working. And I think this is they have to look at a totally different behavior. And digital natives, they don't go into any banks any longer. And also, they are not interested in this kind of, getting together, or they come together with their community. And I think banks are more and more investing and even buying startups in the fintech area.
Well said. And Petra, how are banks ensuring security of digital transactions and protecting customer data?
Well, I am not a banker. I'm no longer any longer a banker. I think this is a good question. I think they do a lot. However, we see all the attacks going on all the time. I think there will never be 100% guarantee that our data will be 100% protected. And if I look at one of the societies that is really developed in terms of digitalization and security, this is Estonia. And even this country who has built this X-Road, which is a kind of a protection wall again to protect all stored data, even they have been hacked in the past. And I think they do a lot. However, what I see is, given the fact, if you look at the news, you see bankers hacked, hospitals hacked, universities hacked, these data are hacked. They still don't really realize, a majority don't realize what to do to really make your data secure. So there's a lot to do in the future, and maybe the whole blockchain technology will help securing these data.
Correct. And since you are a legal person, digitalization, how are laws and regulations evolving to keep pace with the digital transformation in banking?
Well, I think this is maybe one of the biggest problems we have in the world, because law and regulation, they are all very, very, they are related to a country. So you have thousands of different law systems, and they all want to cover one international problem. So as long as we do not have an approach that is an international approach, as long as we do not incentivize regulations and financial governments to work together, then we will fail in the long run, because there will be regulations. As long as you have regulations within the borders of your country, you cannot cover a global problem.
Well said. My next question is that with the rise of fintech startups, how is this beginning to impact a lot of the traditional institutions?
First of all, there's more competition. Secondly, I think the whole new generation who was born and basically raised with the whole digital tools we do have, they see that you can make a transaction secure without having a bank involved. And to be quite honest, again, blockchain technology will have their help there. And I think the big banks, they came to realize that they have to invest there and that they have to partner with all those young companies who are doing this. But I think an average bank, middle-class bank, who doesn't even have the capacity and the money to invest, they will face the problems there very soon.
Very interesting. And yet, I've been speaking to many other people, and they say that regulations for fintech startups is not yet adequate to ensure customer protection and maintain financial stability. What are your thoughts?
I think you're totally right. Well, one of the biggest problems with all the regulations is people are working in these institutions for, let's say, in the European countries for almost 30 years. And they were born in the analog world, and now they have to face the problems in the digital world. And for many of them, they even lack the understanding of the whole systems. And I do believe, that a lot of regulation authorities, they don't even have the intellectual capacity to deal with that. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to blame any of these people not being able to do it, but you see that they are, out of the sudden, they are confronted with some stuff that doesn't come naturally to them. So I believe that a lot of regulations, first of all, lack the capacity to deal with that. Plus, and that's another problem in the whole world, regulations, it's always government. It takes for ages before something changes in a world that is changing on a daily basis. And that, I think, will be our problem for years. And this is why all, let's say, the fintech, but also the darknet, all these authorities, all these companies who are very quick and who are not regulated, that they will always be a danger for a normal regulation framework.
Thank you. My next question is that, you spoke a little bit about blockchain, but how are emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, blockchain, big data analytics, how are these being used in the banking sector?
To be quite honest, I don't feel 100% comfortable to answer this question because I'm no longer working in this banking system, but they are used for sure, but I really don't know to what extent.
I understand. One or two more questions on banking, then we'll talk a little bit about role model rebels. What are some of the ethical considerations, that are now being faced in modern banking?
Bias, for example, if you go to artificial intelligence, you see all the bias. If you, for example, there was one example, that let's say someone was black and a woman from a certain country she's applying online for a mortgage, and she doesn't get the mortgage due to the bias behind the artificial intelligence. I think we are facing a big problem with how these data are selected and how they feed into the algorithm, so that we do have in the end results that people feel comfortable with. I think ethical aspects in the whole AI and algorithm implementation, data implementation is important. And that is something where we will always have problems as long as we cannot guarantee how the data are how the data are structured. And if we feed algorithm with unstructured data, unethical data, we will have unethical results.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit now about Role Model Rebels that you founded. What is the mission?
Well, the mission is like to leave no one behind. During the pandemic, I was one of the jury members and mentors at the European Union versus Virus Hackathon, at the German one, at the Switzerland one. And while I was sitting at home, I was on screen giving advice. A lot of young people, men and women, came asking me, "Hey, Petra, could you tell me how to start a career in legal tech, or how can I apply for this and this university?" And I then realized, just for me, I was just like, hey, I never had a role model. I never had one. And then I had a look at all the basically women networks, and I felt, yeah, there are a lot of networks out, but they were either very much dedicated to the founder, so the founder was in the limelight all the time, or very much about topics where I felt, no, that's not important to me. Let's say it's fashion and lifestyle, etc., etc. And I just thought, hey, I'm that old and I'm able to talk about digitalization. I was able to do legal technology conference. I just thought, hey, I do something that's a think tank for women, because I've been working around the world. I had access to the C-level women. So I just felt, hey, ask the C-level women, will you be willing to help and mentor younger women? They all said yes. So Role Model Rebel is a think tank for women, a network platform, and we are focusing on new digital business models and on new digital jobs. And to be quite clear here, members are women, however, men are speakers as well as participants, unless we have a very, very, very like femtech, fem health topic, then are not there. But it's a platform that I created, and within less than 2 years, I have more than 3,000 participants without any advertising. And it's an amazing platform.
Fascinating. And how do you match someone who's a role model with someone who's looking for a role model?
Yes, this is a good question. I was asking myself how I am going to do this, because when I started, I was on my own. And then one of the winners of the European Union versus Virus Hackathon, one of the winners was a very, very small company based in Austria, founded by 2 young men, and they created a coaching platform, 100% automated. So one of our role models, she is basically based in Australia. She said, may I introduce you? Because I was a mentor to these guys. And they built us this platform. It's a 100% automated coaching platform where the role models they just like, they build their own profile on this platform. They offer their services, they paid services, but every role model offers unpaid services like coaching. And so we have these role models, and those who want to get in touch with them, they can use this platform asking, hey, I'm very much interested. Could you tell me how I can, how I can perform a career in Indian Railway? I'm an engineer. And then we have someone doing this, and she's then coaching these people. So it's 100% automated, and it is one part of Role Model Rebels.
Amazing. And why do you use the word rebels in the name?
To be quite honest, when I applied for the URL, all the rest was gone.
Okay.
So, and then I had all the other names, and I just felt, hey, Role Model Rebels. And then people told me, said, hey, I like the rebels in your URL, but the rest was gone. That is the reason why this name came up.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about the Davos Digital Forum. What are you doing in the Davos Digital Forum?
Well, because when I started with the legal technology, and I did the Swiss Legal Technology Conference, and I came to realize, first of all, what I already mentioned, that a lot of lawyers, regulators are very, like, say, narrow-minded. They never thought about digitalization before the pandemic, and then they had to realize, okay, we have to do something. I felt legal is too narrow. And whatever you do in our world, we have to integrate legal. And I just felt it's much more interesting looking at digitalization of cities, smart cities and villages, whatever you do, whether it is education tech, whether it is health tech, whether it is logistic, whether it is infrastructure in terms of traffic, you have to embed the legal stuff. And this is how we started, because I said, well, legal has to be integrated in that, but we have to look at what's going to happen. And during the pandemic, we started before the pandemic. However, during the pandemic, I got to know countries or cities like Trondheim in Norway, or even countries like Estonia, because they were all part of these hackathons, big hackathons, and I saw what they are doing, and I was pretty much impressed. And what I see is, that's again a problem basically for everything, is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. If someone has already built an autonomous car that can transport elderly people from A to B, we don't need to do it again if the technique is already there, if the software is there. And this is what we are basically doing. We're trying to transfer knowledge, establish knowledge in the area to, let's say, smaller cities and villages here in Davos.
And again, is the profile young people who are joining the forum, or
no,
any age?
In that case, not any age, but I have to say it's more those people who are in mid-career and already advanced career positions, because they are in charge of, for example, let's say for Roche, they do have EMAS, electronic mobility as a service. They have people responsible for that, and those people, they are very knowledgeable. However, they would like to get access to other countries, to other leaders in that area, and this is that the reason that majority of people is mid-career and advanced.
Fascinating. So Petra, I have time for two more questions. Tell me about your book, Digital Transformation and Legal Transformation.
It was really funny. While I was in Asia and also in the US, I attended, it was in 2014, 2015, I attended conferences on digitalization, and I just realized, hey, there's so much room for legal. And I saw what was done in legal technology, especially in countries, let's say Asian, but also American countries, and it was all dedicated to access to law, because their platforms, digital platforms, access to law. And then I found this so fascinating, and I just started, I wanted to do something about that. So I started digging into it, and I wrote my first articles, and I became a speaker. And on one of these conferences, a very, very famous German lawyer he's a lawyer and a journalist by training, and he runs the biggest YouTube channel in terms of legal, but legal for ordinary mortals. So something like 10 things teachers do are not allowed to do and stuff like that.
Mm.
And he is very, very much into digitalization with his own legal company. However, cut a long story short, he approached me, said, hey, Petra, you're doing great stuff. Why don't we write a book together about legal technology?
Wow.
And I didn't know he had the community. He had the community because he was running this biggest YouTube channel in the German speaking world. And this is how the book was basically born. And to be quite honest, the result is great, but I don't like writing. For me, it was kind of a pain, but I was able to manage and finish this book. And that was already in 2017.
Amazing. Thank you. And my last question to you, Petra, and this is for the many, many young people who will listen to our conversation. You've done so much work in the area of, digital work with the Role Model Rebels. What would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of young people to take away from your journey?
Okay, first of all, even if you're in your 20s and you believe you have your friends you hang out with, build a network at the age of 20. Start building a network. Secondly, there is not such thing like one journey. There is not. And there will things happen in your life you never expected. You will have ups and downs. And just like look at the bright side of life. Try to look at the bright side at life. And last but not least, maybe that's the most important thing for me, is never stop learning, lifelong learning. And if you do this and you see me, my age, you are able to communicate, I'm able to communicate from 20 to 80. And I communicate with people regardless of their background, regardless of their age, their color, whatsoever. And I think this is also due to the fact that I am a big fan of lifelong learning that keeps you young. And also, I also believe if you're young in head, you're also young in body, because you think about, hey, I need to do something. I need to go skiing, or I need to go play golf.
Very well said. On that note, Petra, and your 3 wonderful lessons: build a network as soon as possible. There is nothing like one journey. There will be ups and downs. And the third one, which is so powerful, never stop learning, or lifelong learning. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. Thank you for speaking to me about the intersection of banking, law, and digitization. Thank you for speaking to me about the Davos Digital Forum and Role Model Rebels. Thank you again, and good luck.
Ash, thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful time. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Ash.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.